Max was not like other bulldogs. His wrinkled face carried more sadness than most dogs his age, and his brown eyes held stories that would break anyone's heart. At 3 years old, he had already lived in 6 different homes, each one promising to be his forever family, and each one giving up on him for reasons that seemed to pile up like autumn leaves. The animal shelter workers knew Max well. Too well. His kennel had become almost like a hotel room that he checked into between failed adoptions. The metal bars, the concrete floor, the constant barking of other hopeful dogs. It was all familiar territory now. But what hurt most was watching other dogs come and go, finding their happy endings while he remained behind. Sarah, one of the younger volunteers, always made sure to spend extra time with Max. She would sit by his kennel during her lunch breaks, sharing her sandwich and talking to him about everything and nothing. Max would press his flat nose against the chain-link fence, his stubby tail wagging with cautious hope whenever he saw her approaching. "You're going to find your family, big guy," Sarah would whisper, scratching behind his ears. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but somewhere out there is a little girl or boy who needs exactly what you have to give." Max's first home had been with the Johnsons, a retired couple who thought a calm older dog would be perfect for their quiet lifestyle. But Max wasn't calm. He was anxious, pacing around their pristine living room, leaving drool marks on their expensive furniture. When he accidentally knocked over Mrs. Johnson's favorite vase while playing, they decided he was too energetic for their peaceful retirement. The second family, the Rodriguez family, had 2 teenage boys who begged their parents for a tough-looking dog. Max seemed perfect with his muscular build and intimidating appearance. But when the boys tried to teach him to be aggressive, Max would just sit down and tilt his head in confusion. He wanted to play and cuddle, not growl and show his teeth. The family returned him after a month, disappointed that their guard dog was actually a gentle giant who would probably lick an intruder to death. Home number 3 belonged to Sandra, a single woman in her 30s who lived alone in a small apartment. She thought Max would be the perfect companion, someone to keep her company during long winter evenings. For a few weeks, it seemed like it might work. Max loved curling up next to Sandra on the couch while she watched television, his heavy breathing providing a comforting soundtrack to their quiet evenings together. But Sandra worked long hours at her law firm, often leaving Max alone for 10 or 12 hours at a time. The isolation drove Max crazy. He would howl and bark, disturbing the neighbors in her apartment building. When the landlord threatened eviction due to noise complaints, Sandra made the heartbreaking decision to return Max to the shelter. "I'm so sorry, boy," she whispered as she handed his leash back to the shelter staff. "I thought I could make it work, but it's not fair to you or to me." The fourth family was the worst. The Millers had responded to Max's adoption listing online, but when they arrived at the shelter, it became clear they had ulterior motives. They wanted to use Max for breeding, seeing dollar signs in his purebred status. The shelter staff were suspicious from the beginning, but Max had been returned so many times that they hoped maybe this time would be different. It wasn't. The Millers kept Max in a small outdoor kennel, feeding him cheap food and providing minimal interaction. They were only interested in him as a money-making machine, not as a family member. When a surprise inspection from animal control revealed the poor conditions, Max was rescued and returned to the shelter, traumatized and underweight. Family number 5, the Changs, seemed promising at first. They had done their research, prepared their home, and even bought Max a comfortable dog bed and quality food. Their 2 young children, ages 8 and 10, were excited about having a pet. But what they hadn't prepared for were Max's behavioral issues that had developed from his repeated abandonments. Max had started displaying signs of separation anxiety and depression. He would destroy furniture when left alone, not out of malice but out of panic and fear that he was being abandoned again. He stopped eating regularly, his ribs beginning to show through his coat. The children grew frustrated when Max wouldn't play fetch or learn tricks as quickly as they expected. After 3 months of trying various training methods and consulting with veterinarians, the Changs decided they were in over their heads. Max needed more help than they could provide, and they worried about the effect his behavior was having on their children. The 6th family was perhaps the most heartbreaking, because they genuinely loved Max. The Smiths were experienced dog owners who understood that Max would need time and patience to overcome his trust issues. For almost 6 months, it seemed like Max had finally found his forever home. He began to relax, his tail wagged more frequently, and he even started playing with toys again. The Smiths worked with a professional dog trainer, slowly helping Max overcome his anxiety and behavioral problems. Just when everyone thought Max had finally found his happy ending, tragedy struck the Smith family. Mr. Smith lost his job due to company downsizing, and Mrs. Smith was diagnosed with a serious illness that required expensive treatment. With mounting medical bills and unemployment, they could no longer afford Max's veterinary care, special food, and training sessions. With tears in their eyes, they brought Max back to the shelter one final time. "We love him so much," Mrs. Smith sobbed as she hugged Max goodbye. "But we can't give him what he needs right now. Please find him a family who can take better care of him than we can." By the time Max returned to the shelter for the 6th time, something had changed in his eyes. The hope that had always flickered there, even after previous disappointments, seemed dimmed. He stopped wagging his tail when potential adopters walked by his kennel. He barely touched his food, and he spent most of his days curled up in the corner, facing the wall. The shelter staff were heartbroken. They had watched Max's spirit slowly break with each return, and they worried that he might be becoming unadoptable. Some dogs they knew never recovered from that kind of repeated rejection. They began to wonder if Max would spend the rest of his life behind those familiar metal bars, watching other dogs find the happiness that seemed to elude him at every turn. But Sarah refused to give up on Max. Every day, she would sit by his kennel, talking to him even when he wouldn't look at her. She brought him special treats, sang him songs, and told him stories about all the families who were still out there, waiting to meet their perfect dog. Tomorrow could be the day. "Max," she would say, her voice full of determination, "tomorrow could be the day everything changes." Max would close his eyes and try to believe her, but his heart had been broken too many times. He didn't know that just a few miles away, a little girl was asking her parents for the 100th time when they could get a dog, and that soon their paths would cross in a way that would change both of their lives forever. 8-year-old Emma Thompson had been asking for a dog since she could speak in complete sentences. Her bedroom walls were covered with pictures of dogs she had cut out from magazines, and her bookshelf was filled with every dog story ever written. She knew the names and characteristics of every breed, could spot a golden retriever from 3 blocks away, and had already picked out 17 different names for the dog she hoped to someday call her own. But Emma's parents, David and Lisa Thompson, had always found reasons to say no. They were busy with their careers, the house wasn't big enough, dogs were too much responsibility, maybe when she was older. Emma had heard every excuse in the book, but she never stopped believing that someday her family would be complete with 4 legs and a wagging tail. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. Emma woke up feeling different, though she couldn't explain why. The autumn air smelled crisp and full of possibilities as she walked to school, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. During math class, she found herself drawing pictures of dogs in the margins of her notebook instead of solving multiplication problems. "Emma, can you tell us what 7 times 8 equals?" Mrs. Peterson asked, noticing her students' wandering attention. 56, Emma answered automatically, not looking up from her drawing of a bulldog with a wrinkled face and kind eyes. She had been drawing the same dog for weeks now, though she didn't know why this particular breed had captured her imagination. That afternoon, Emma's grandmother called with news that would change everything. Grandma Rose had been watching the local news during lunch when a story came on about the overwhelmed animal shelter across town. They were having an adoption event that weekend, hoping to find homes for some of their long-term residents. "Lisa, honey," Grandma Rose said to Emma's mother over the phone, "I've been thinking about what Emma's been asking for. That little girl has wanted a dog for so long, and she's proven how responsible she is. Maybe it's time." Lisa Thompson sighed, looking around their modest home. "Mom, you know how David feels about pets. He thinks they're too much work, too expensive." "Sometimes the best things in life require a little work," Grandma Rose replied gently. "And sometimes a child's happiness is worth more than a clean house or a few extra dollars spent on dog food." Meanwhile, David Thompson was having his own moment of reflection at work. His coworker James had been sharing pictures of his family's new puppy, talking about how the dog had brought so much joy to his children's lives. David found himself remembering his own childhood dog, Buddy, and how that German shepherd had been his constant companion through some difficult teenage years. "You know," James said, noticing David's thoughtful expression, "there's something special about the bond between a kid and their first dog. It teaches them responsibility, empathy, loyalty, things you can't learn from books or video games." David nodded slowly, thinking about Emma's disappointed face every time they had turned down her requests for a pet. His daughter was kind, responsible, and had never asked for much. Maybe it was time to reconsider. That evening, the Thompson family sat around the dinner table having what would become the most important conversation of their lives. Emma was pushing her vegetables around her plate, still daydreaming about the bulldog she had been drawing all day. "Emma," her father said carefully, "Mom and I have been talking about something important." Emma looked up, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Her parents had that serious look that usually meant she was in trouble or someone had bad news. "You know how you've been asking about getting a dog?" Lisa continued, glancing at her husband for support. Emma's heart started racing. Were they going to tell her she had to stop asking? Were they going to explain again why they couldn't have a pet? "Well," David said, surprising himself with his own words, "we think it might be time to visit the animal shelter this weekend. Just to look around and see if there might be a dog there who needs a family like ours." The fork fell from Emma's hand, clattering onto her plate. For a moment she was so shocked she couldn't speak. Then the biggest smile anyone had ever seen spread across her face. "Really, really, truly? We can go look at dogs?" she managed to squeak out. "Just to look," Lisa emphasized, though she was smiling too. "We want to make sure we find the right fit for our family, and that means taking our time and making a responsible choice." Emma jumped up from her chair and hugged both her parents so tightly they could barely breathe. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I promise I'll take such good care of whatever dog we find. I'll feed it and walk it and teach it tricks and love it forever and ever." The rest of the week passed incredibly slowly for Emma. She researched everything she could about dog care, made lists of supplies they would need, and practiced calling out the names she had picked over the years. Every night she would look at the picture of the wrinkled bulldog she had drawn and wonder if somewhere out there was a real dog just waiting to become part of their family. At the animal shelter, the staff were preparing for their weekend adoption event with mixed emotions. They were hopeful that some of their long-term residents would finally find homes, but they were also worried about dogs like Max who had been returned so many times before. "Maybe we shouldn't include Max in the adoption event," suggested Janet, one of the senior staff members. "He's been through so much already. What if he gets adopted again and then returned? I don't think his heart could take another rejection." Sarah, the young volunteer who had never given up on Max, shook her head firmly. "Every dog deserves a chance at happiness. We can't protect Max from disappointment by keeping him locked away from love. Besides, what if the perfect family is coming this weekend? What if his forever family walks through those doors and we don't give them the chance to meet him?" The debate continued, but in the end they decided to include all their adoptable dogs in the weekend event. They would just be extra careful about screening potential adopters, making sure anyone interested in Max understood his history and was prepared for the commitment required. On Friday evening, Max lay in his familiar kennel, unaware that his life was about to change forever. He had grown so accustomed to disappointment that he no longer allowed himself to feel excited about adoption events. The sounds of the shelter being decorated and prepared for the weekend visitors felt distant and unimportant. Sarah stopped by his kennel one last time before leaving for the day. "Big weekend coming up, Max," she said softly. "I have a really good feeling about this one. I know you've heard that before, but something feels different this time." Max lifted his head slightly, his brown eyes meeting Sarah's for just a moment before he looked away again. He wanted to believe her, but believing hurt too much when it didn't come true. Miles away, Emma Thompson was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to fall asleep. Tomorrow was the day she had dreamed about for years. Tomorrow she would finally meet dogs who needed homes. And maybe, just maybe, one of them would need her as much as she needed them. She closed her eyes and made a wish on every star she could see through her bedroom window. She wished for a dog who had been waiting a long time for a family. A dog who needed extra love and patience. A dog who would understand that sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for. In her dreams that night, Emma saw a wrinkled face and gentle brown eyes, and somewhere across town Max stirred in his sleep, dreaming of a little girl's laugh and the feeling of being truly wanted for the first time in his life. Saturday morning arrived with golden sunshine streaming through Emma's bedroom window, as if the universe was celebrating the day she had been waiting for her entire life. She woke up before her alarm clock, her heart already racing with excitement. Today was adoption day at the animal shelter, and nothing was going to stop her from finding her perfect companion. Emma had laid out her clothes the night before, her favorite jeans, a purple t-shirt with a cartoon dog on it, and her lucky sneakers. She wanted to look perfect for the dog she was about to meet, even though she had no idea what that dog might look like or what his story might be. Downstairs, her parents were already awake, drinking coffee and looking through the shelter's website on Lisa's laptop. They had been doing research too, reading about different breeds and what to expect from shelter dogs. "Look at this," Lisa said, pointing to the screen. "They have dogs of all ages and sizes. Some have been there for just a few weeks, others for much longer." David nodded, still feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness about the commitment they were about to make. "The important thing is that we take our time. We don't want to rush into anything just because Emma falls in love with the first dog she sees." As if summoned by her name, Emma bounded into the kitchen, her hair still messy from sleep but her eyes bright with anticipation. "Are we going now? Can we go now? I've been ready for 3 years." Her parents laughed at their daughter's enthusiasm. After a quick breakfast and a brief discussion about what to expect at the shelter, the Thompson family piled into their car and began the 20-minute drive that would change all of their lives. At the animal shelter, the staff had been busy since dawn preparing for the adoption event. Colorful banners were hung across the entrance. Volunteers had groomed and exercised all the dogs, and information sheets about each animal were prepared for potential adopters. Max watched the preparations from his kennel with detached interest. He had seen this routine many times before. The excited chatter of volunteers, the extra cleaning and decorating, the hope that filled the air like perfume. He knew that by evening, some of his fellow shelter residents would be going home with new families, and he would still be here watching from behind his familiar metal bars. Sarah arrived early to help with the final preparations. She made a special stop at Max's kennel, kneeling down to look into his sad brown eyes. "Today feels different, Max," she whispered. "I know you don't believe me anymore, but I have this feeling in my heart that your family is coming today. Your real family, the one who will never give up on you." Max huffed softly, a sound that might have been skepticism or might have been hope. Even though he tried to protect his heart from disappointment, some small part of him still yearned for a family to call his own. The adoption event officially began at 10 o'clock, and by 10:15, the shelter was bustling with families, couples, and individuals looking for their perfect pet. The sounds of barking, laughing children, and excited conversations filled the air. Emma and her parents arrived at 10:30, and Emma's eyes went wide as they walked through the entrance. There were so many dogs, each one beautiful and special in their own way. Golden retrievers with flowing coats, energetic border collies, tiny chihuahuas with enormous personalities, and gentle giants who looked like they could guard a castle but probably just wanted belly rubs. "Oh my goodness," Emma breathed, turning in slow circles to take it all in. "How am I supposed to choose? They're all perfect." A volunteer named Rachel approached them with a clipboard and a warm smile. "First time at a shelter?" she asked kindly. "Emma's wanted a dog for years," Lisa explained. "We thought it was finally time to see if we could find the right match for our family." Rachel nodded knowingly. "The best matches often happen naturally. Why don't you walk around and see if any of our dogs catch your interest? Take your time, ask questions, and don't feel pressured to make a decision today. The right dog will let you know." The Thompson family began their tour of the shelter, stopping at kennel after kennel. Emma fell in love approximately 15 times in the first 20 minutes. There was Bella, a chocolate Labrador with a tennis ball permanently attached to her mouth. There was Rocky, a German Shepherd mix who sat perfectly and offered his paw to shake. There was Daisy, a fluffy golden retriever who seemed to smile every time someone looked at her. But somehow none of them felt quite right. Emma couldn't explain it, but she was waiting for something, some kind of sign or feeling that would tell her she had found her dog. They were almost halfway through the shelter when Emma stopped suddenly. In the corner, in a kennel that seemed quieter than the others, she saw him. A bulldog with a wrinkled face and the saddest brown eyes she had ever seen. He wasn't barking or trying to get attention like many of the other dogs. He was simply sitting, watching the families pass by with a resigned expression that broke Emma's heart. "Mom, Dad," she whispered, pointing toward Max's kennel. "Look at him." David and Lisa followed their daughter's gaze and saw Max for the first time. He was not what they had expected. He wasn't jumping or wagging his tail or putting on a show for potential adopters. He was just sitting there looking like he had given up hope. "He looks so sad," Emma said softly, walking slowly toward Max's kennel. "Why isn't anyone paying attention to him?" As Emma approached, Max lifted his head slightly. Something about this little girl was different from the other people who had walked past his kennel that morning. She wasn't talking in the high-pitched, excited voice that most children used around dogs. She was moving slowly, carefully, as if she understood that he might be scared or hurt. "Hello," Emma said quietly, kneeling down in front of Max's kennel. "What's your name, beautiful boy?" Max's ears perked up at the word beautiful. It had been a very long time since anyone had called him beautiful. Most people focused on his slobbery jowls, his wrinkled face, or his stocky build. This little girl was looking at him like he was the most handsome dog in the world. Sarah noticed the interaction from across the room and hurried over, her heart beating faster with hope and fear. "This is Max," Sarah said gently. "He's been with us for a while. He's 3 years old, and he's one of the sweetest dogs you'll ever meet." Emma pressed her small hand against the chain-link fence, and to everyone's amazement, Max slowly approached and pressed his nose against her palm. For the first time in months, his stubby tail gave the tiniest wag. "He likes you," David observed, surprised by the gentle interaction. "I like him too," Emma whispered, never taking her eyes off Max. "He looks like he's been waiting for someone to love him." Lisa felt a tug at her heartstrings as she watched her daughter connect with this sad-eyed bulldog. "Sarah, can you tell us about Max's history?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, unsure how much to reveal. She didn't want to scare away what might be Max's last chance at happiness, but she also believed in being honest with potential adopters. "Max has had some challenges," Sarah began carefully. "He's been adopted and returned several times through no fault of his own. He's a wonderful dog, but he needs a family who understands that he might need extra patience and love while he learns to trust again." Instead of discouraging the Thompson family, this information seemed to solidify something in Emma's heart. She looked up at her parents with tears in her eyes. "He's been given back? People didn't want him?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Sometimes things just don't work out," Sarah explained gently. "But that doesn't mean Max isn't meant for the perfect family." Emma turned back to Max, who was still pressed against the fence, his brown eyes locked on hers. "I want him," she said with quiet certainty. "He's been waiting for us, haven't you, Max?" The moment Emma declared her intention to adopt Max, the shelter seemed to hold its breath. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears, hardly daring to believe that this might finally be the day Max found his forever home. But she had seen this hope shattered so many times before that she forced herself to remain cautious. "Would you like to spend some time with Max in one of our meet-and-greet rooms?" Sarah suggested. "It's important that you get to know each other before making any final decisions." Emma nodded eagerly, never taking her eyes off Max. David and Lisa exchanged glances, both moved by their daughter's instant connection with this sad-eyed bulldog, but also concerned about what they were getting into. Sarah led the Thompson family to a small, comfortable room with chairs, toys, and blankets where potential adopters could interact with dogs in a calm environment. She went to get Max, clipping a leash to his collar and speaking to him in gentle tones. "Come on, big guy," she whispered. "There's a very special little girl who wants to meet you properly." Max walked slowly beside Sarah, his head hanging low. He had been through this routine before. The meet-and-greet rooms, the excited families, the promises that this time would be different. He had learned not to get his hopes up. But when Sarah opened the door to the room and Max saw Emma sitting quietly on the floor, something stirred in his chest. The little girl wasn't bouncing around excitedly or making loud noises like many children did. She was simply sitting there waiting patiently for him to come to her. "Hi, Max," Emma said softly as Sarah unclipped his leash. "You don't have to come over here if you don't want to. We can just sit together." Max stood frozen in the doorway for a moment, unsure what to do. His past experiences had taught him to be wary of new people, especially ones who seemed too eager to win his affection. But there was something different about Emma. She wasn't demanding his attention or trying to force him to play. She was just There, calm and patient and kind. Slowly, Max took a step into the room, then another. Emma remained perfectly still, letting him approach at his own pace. David and Lisa watched in amazement as their usually energetic daughter showed incredible patience and wisdom in dealing with this anxious dog. After what felt like an eternity, Max reached Emma and gently sniffed her outstretched hand. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and vanilla cookies, comforting scents that reminded him of kindness and home. "You're beautiful, Max," Emma whispered, gently stroking his wrinkled forehead. "Has anyone ever told you that before?" Max's tail began to wag slowly, then faster. Something about the way this little girl spoke to him, the gentleness in her touch, the acceptance in her voice, made him feel safe in a way he hadn't felt in years. Within minutes, Max had settled down next to Emma, his heavy head resting on her lap. She continued to pet him softly, talking to him about everything and nothing, her favorite books, her school, her dreams of having a dog who would be her best friend forever. "I think he likes you," Lisa said, her voice thick with emotion as she watched her daughter and Max bond. "I love him already," Emma replied simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. David, who had been the most hesitant about getting a dog, found himself deeply moved by the scene before him. There was something magical about watching his daughter show such compassion and maturity, and seeing this broken-hearted dog slowly begin to trust again. Sarah returned after giving the family some alone time with Max. She was amazed to find Max completely relaxed, his eyes closed as Emma gently scratched behind his ears. "Well," Sarah said with a smile, "it looks like you two have become friends." "More than friends," Emma corrected. "We're family now, aren't we, Max?" Max's response was to roll over onto his back, exposing his belly in the ultimate sign of trust and submission. Emma giggled and gently rubbed his tummy, causing Max's back leg to kick with pleasure. "Sarah," David said, "we need to know everything about Max's history. If we're going to adopt him, we want to be prepared for any challenges we might face." Sarah appreciated David's direct approach. She explained Max's journey through 6 different homes, his struggles with separation anxiety, his fear of abandonment, and the behavioral issues that had developed from his repeated rejections. "He's been through trauma that most dogs never experience," Sarah explained honestly. "He'll need patience, consistency, and probably some professional training. There might be accidents in the house while he adjusts, and he might be destructive if he feels anxious about being left alone." Instead of being deterred by this information, Emma seemed even more determined. "He won't be alone," she said firmly. "I'll be with him every day after school and on weekends and during summer vacation." "Right, Mom and Dad?" Lisa looked at her husband, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. This wasn't going to be easy, and it certainly wasn't going to be cheap. They would need to invest in training, possible behavioral therapy, and extra veterinary care. But looking at their daughter's face, seeing the way Max had already begun to heal in her presence, they knew this was right. "We'll need to discuss logistics," David said practically. "Emma's at school during the day and Lisa and I both work. We'll need to figure out how to make sure Max isn't alone for too long while he adjusts. I could come home during lunch breaks for the first few weeks," Lisa offered. "And maybe we could look into doggy daycare or a dog walker." Emma looked back and forth between her parents, holding her breath and silently praying they would say yes. "Sarah," David said finally, "what do we need to do to take Max home?" The words hung in the air like a prayer answered. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized that after 6 failed attempts, Max had finally found his real family. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked, hardly believing it was real. "You understand that this might not be easy, especially at first?" "Nothing worthwhile is ever easy," Lisa said, reaching over to pet Max, who leaned into her touch. "Besides, look at him. He's already part of our family." The adoption paperwork took over an hour to complete. There were background checks, references to call, and detailed discussions about Max's care requirements. Throughout the entire process, Max never left Emma's side, as if he somehow understood that this time was different, that these people weren't going to give up on him. Emma sat on the floor next to Max, braiding friendship bracelets out of colorful string she had found in her backpack. "One for me and one for you," she told Max seriously, tying a small bracelet around his collar. "So we'll always remember the day we found each other." As the sun began to set and the adoption event wound down, the Thompson family prepared to take Max home. Sarah walked them to their car, carrying a bag of Max's belongings, his favorite blanket, a worn tennis ball, and his medical records. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to Emma as they reached the parking lot. "Thank you for seeing how special he is. Thank you for giving him a chance when so many others gave up." Emma hugged Sarah tightly. "Thank you for taking care of him until we could find him. He was waiting for us and we were waiting for him. We just didn't know it yet." As Max climbed into the back seat of the Thompson family car, settling down next to Emma like he had been riding there his whole life, Sarah whispered a prayer of gratitude. After 3 years, countless sleepless nights worrying about Max, and 6 heartbreaking returns, she was finally watching him drive away to his real home. Max pressed his nose against the car window as they drove away from the shelter for what everyone hoped would be the last time. But instead of looking back with sadness, he was looking forward, toward the future that awaited him with the little girl who had seen his worth when everyone else had given up on him. The car ride home was unlike any experience Max had ever had. In his previous adoptions, he had sat rigidly in vehicles, sensing the uncertainty and mixed emotions of his temporary families. But this ride felt different. Emma sat beside him, her small hand gently resting on his back, talking to him in a soft, steady voice about all the adventures they would have together. "Our house has a big backyard." "Max," Emma told him, her eyes bright with excitement, "there's a maple tree you can sit under when it's hot, and Mom said we can get you a kiddie pool for the summer. Do you like swimming?" "We'll find out together." Max listened to every word, his brown eyes fixed on Emma's face, something deep inside his chest. Something that had been cold and closed off for so long began to warm up. This little girl spoke to him like he was already family, like his place in their home was guaranteed and permanent. When they pulled into the driveway of a modest 2-story house with white shutters and a red front door, Max felt a flutter of nervousness. How many times had he approached a new house full of hope that this would finally be home, only to be disappointed again? But Emma must have sensed his anxiety because she leaned over and whispered, "This is it, Max. This is our house. Your house. You're never going to have to leave here, I promise." The family had stopped at a pet store on the way home, letting Emma pick out supplies for Max. She had chosen a soft blue collar with silver studs, a matching leash, food and water bowls with paw prints on them, and a plush dog bed that was so comfortable even the humans wanted to try it out. But most importantly, she had selected a stuffed elephant that she declared would be Max's comfort buddy. "Every dog needs a special toy," Emma had explained seriously to her parents. "And elephants are good luck. Max needs all the good luck he can get." Now, as they walked up to the front door, Max carried his new elephant gently in his mouth, following Emma like she was his personal guide to happiness. The house smelled like vanilla candles and fresh laundry, comforting scents that made Max feel instantly more relaxed. Emma gave him a complete tour, showing him every room and explaining what happened in each space. "This is the kitchen, where we eat breakfast together every morning," she said, pointing to a sunny room with yellow walls and a round table. "And this is the living room, where we watch movies on Friday nights. You can sit on the couch with us if you want to." Max followed Emma upstairs to see her bedroom, a cheerful space filled with books, art supplies, and pictures of dogs covering nearly every surface. Emma had already cleared a spot next to her bed where Max's new dog bed would go. "I want you close to me," she explained, arranging his bed just so, "in case you have bad dreams or get scared during the night. I used to get scared sometimes too, but now I won't because you'll be here to protect me." The idea that this little girl might need his protection filled Max with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. All his life, people had focused on what was wrong with him, what he couldn't do, how he had failed to meet their expectations. But Emma was telling him that he had something valuable to offer her. David and Lisa watched their daughter settle Max into his new home with a mixture of amazement and slight concern. Emma seemed to instinctively understand what Max needed, but they worried about what would happen when the novelty wore off, when the reality of caring for a traumatized dog set in. Their first night together was a test that none of them were quite prepared for. Max had seemed calm and content during the day, exploring his new surroundings and bonding with Emma. But as bedtime approached, his old anxieties began to surface. When Emma went upstairs to brush her teeth and put on her pajamas, Max began to pace frantically around the living room. He whined softly, then louder, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. The familiar fear of abandonment was creeping back in. What if they changed their minds? What if he woke up tomorrow and found himself back at the shelter? Lisa noticed Max's distress first. David, look at him. He's having some kind of panic attack. David knelt down next to Max, speaking in calm, soothing tones. Hey boy, it's okay. Emma's just upstairs. She's coming right back. But Max couldn't be consoled. His past experiences had taught him that when people went away, they often didn't come back. Or if they did come back, it was only to take him somewhere else. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs in her purple pajamas, immediately understanding what was happening. Max, are you scared? I'm right here, buddy. She came down and sat on the floor next to Max, gently stroking his trembling sides. I know you're scared that we might not want you anymore. But look at me, Max. Look right into my eyes. Max lifted his worried brown eyes to meet Emma's steady green ones. I am never, ever going to give up on you, she said with the fierce determination that only an 8-year-old can possess. Not when you're scared, not when you make mistakes, not when things get hard. You are my dog now, and I am your girl, and that's never going to change. Do you understand? Something in Emma's voice, some quality of absolute truth and unwavering commitment, seemed to reach Max in a way that adult reassurances couldn't. His breathing began to slow, his trembling eased, and he leaned into Emma's small body. Would it help if I stayed down here with you tonight? Emma asked. Just for tonight until you feel safe? Lisa started to protest. Emma needed her sleep, the couch wasn't comfortable, this might set a bad precedent. But David put a gentle hand on his wife's arm. Maybe just for tonight, he said quietly, until Max understands that he's really home. Emma grabbed her pillow and favorite blanket from upstairs and made herself a bed on the couch. Max curled up on his new dog bed beside her, his elephant clutched firmly in his mouth. Every few minutes he would lift his head to make sure Emma was still there, and each time she would reach down to pat him reassuringly. I'm right here, Max, she would whisper. Go to sleep. I'll be here when you wake up. It took Max a long time to fall asleep that first night. Years of disappointment and abandonment don't disappear overnight, even in the most loving of homes. But eventually, exhausted by emotion and lulled by Emma's steady breathing, he drifted off to sleep. He woke up several times during the night, each time checking to make sure Emma was still there. And each time she was sometimes awake and ready with a gentle word of comfort, sometimes sleeping peacefully on the couch above him. When morning sunlight streamed through the living room windows, Max opened his eyes to find Emma already awake, sitting on the floor next to his bed and reading a book quietly so as not to disturb him. Good morning, Max, she said with a smile that could have powered the entire house. See, I told you I'd be here when you woke up. For the first time in his life, Max had made it through the night in a new home without being consumed by fear and anxiety. This little girl had kept her promise. She had stayed with him, protected him from his own fears, and welcomed him into a new day with love and patience. As Emma got ready for school that Monday morning, Max felt the familiar panic starting to build again. Was she leaving forever? Would he be alone all day? Wondering if she would ever come back? But Emma had thought of this too. Before she left for school, she sat down with Max and showed him a special chart she had made. See this, Max? This shows you exactly when I'll be home. When the big hand is on the 12 and the little hand is on the 3, I'll walk through that front door. Mom will be here with you and Dad will come home at 5:30. We're never going to leave you alone for very long. She also left him with one of her worn t-shirts, something that smelled like her, to comfort him while she was gone. Hold on to this while I'm at school, she instructed. It will remind you that I'm thinking about you every minute. As Emma headed off to school, chattering excitedly to her parents about how she was going to tell everyone about Max, the Bulldog settled down to wait for her return. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just waiting. He was believing that someone would actually come back for him. The first few weeks with Max were a journey of small victories and gentle challenges that brought the Thompson family closer together in ways they never expected. Emma kept her promise to come straight home from school every day, bursting through the front door with stories about her day and treats for Max hidden in her backpack. Max, I'm home, became the most beautiful sound in the Thompson household. No matter where Max was when he heard Emma's voice, he would come running with his whole body wiggling with joy, his stubby tail wagging so hard his entire back end would shake. Lisa had arranged to work from home 3 days a week during Max's adjustment period, and she was amazed by the changes she witnessed in the Bulldog. In his previous homes, Max had been described as destructive and anxious when left alone. But with Emma's patient love and the family's consistent routine, those behaviors began to fade away. The transformation wasn't instant or without its bumps. There were still accidents in the house when Max got nervous, and he would sometimes howl pitifully when Emma was at school, despite Lisa being right there with him. But each setback was met with understanding rather than punishment, patience rather than frustration. David, who had been the most hesitant about getting a dog, found himself becoming one of Max's biggest advocates. He started taking Max for walks around the neighborhood every morning before work, enjoying the quiet time together and the way Max seemed to puff up with pride when other dog owners complimented his good behavior. "You know," David told Lisa one evening as they watched Emma and Max cuddled together on the couch, "I never understood what people meant when they said a dog becomes part of the family. But look at him. I can't imagine our lives without him now." Max's confidence grew stronger every day. He learned the family's routines and began to anticipate them with excitement rather than anxiety. When Emma's alarm clock went off in the morning, Max would stretch and yawn, knowing it was time for their morning cuddle before she got ready for school. When David rattled the leash by the front door, Max would dance in circles knowing a walk was coming. When Lisa started preparing dinner, Max would settle down in the kitchen doorway, content to watch and wait for any scraps that might come his way. But the most remarkable change was in Max's ability to trust. For the first time in his life, he began to believe that love could be permanent, that families didn't always give up when things got difficult. This trust was tested about a month after Max's adoption, when Emma came down with the flu. She was confined to bed for nearly a week, too sick to play with Max or take him for their daily walks around the backyard. In his previous homes, Max might have interpreted this change in routine as a sign that he was being rejected again. Instead, Max appointed himself as Emma's personal nurse. He refused to leave her bedside, lying quietly on the floor next to her bed and alerting Lisa whenever Emma needed anything. When Emma was sleeping, Max would rest his chin on the edge of her mattress, keeping watch over his little girl like a furry guardian angel. "He knows you're sick," Lisa told Emma, bringing her soup and medicine. "He hasn't left your room except to go outside when Dad takes him." Emma, despite feeling terrible, was deeply moved by Max's devotion. "He's taking care of me," she whispered, reaching down to stroke his wrinkled forehead. "Just like I take care of him." When Emma finally recovered and returned to school, Max's joy was so exuberant that he accidentally knocked over a lamp in his excitement. Instead of being upset about the broken lamp, the family laughed and celebrated Max's happiness. This was exactly the kind of moment that would have gotten him returned to the shelter in his previous homes. But with the Thompsons, it was just another story to tell and a reminder of how much love their dog had to give. As winter turned to spring, Max's transformation became even more apparent to everyone who knew him. Sarah, the shelter volunteer who had never given up on Max, came to visit and was amazed by what she saw. "I can't believe this is the same dog," she said, watching Max play fetch with Emma in the backyard. "When he was at the shelter, he wouldn't even look at toys. Now look at him. He's like a completely different animal." Max had learned to play again. Not just the frantic, desperate play of a dog trying to win approval, but the genuine, joyful play of a dog who knew he was loved unconditionally. He would bring Emma his toys and drop them at her feet, then wait with patient excitement for her to throw them. When she praised him for bringing the ball back, his whole face would light up with pride. The neighborhood children had also fallen in love with Max. Word had spread about the gentle Bulldog who lived with the Thompson family, and kids would often stop by to pet him and play in the yard. Max, who had once been too anxious and unpredictable to be around children safely, now thrived on their attention and seemed to understand instinctively how to be gentle with the smaller ones. "He's like a therapy dog," observed Mrs. Jenkins, their elderly neighbor, who had been initially concerned about having a large dog move into the quiet neighborhood. "My granddaughter was afraid of dogs until she met Max. Now she asks to visit him. Every time she comes to see me," Emma beamed with pride whenever anyone complimented Max. She had started a photo album documenting his journey from sad shelter dog to beloved family member, and she would show it to anyone who was interested. "This is Max on his first day home," she would explain, pointing to pictures of a nervous-looking bulldog sitting stiffly on their couch. "And this is Max now," she would continue, flipping to recent photos of Max sprawled comfortably across the same couch, surrounded by toys and wearing a birthday hat from his recent Gotcha Day celebration. The photos told the story better than words ever could. In the early pictures, Max's eyes held wariness and fear, his body language tense and uncertain. In the recent photos, he looked relaxed, confident, and genuinely happy. His eyes sparkled with mischief and love, and his entire body seemed to radiate contentment. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in Max's relationship with being alone. The dog who had once destroyed furniture and howled in panic when left by himself had learned to trust that his family would always come back. Lisa could now run errands without worrying about coming home to chaos, and Max would greet her return with joy rather than the desperate relief of abandonment anxiety. He finally understands, Emma told her parents one evening as they watched Max contentedly chewing on a rope toy. He knows we're never going to give up on him, no matter what. As Max's first year with the Thompson family approached, it was clear that the scared, broken-hearted dog who had been returned to the shelter 6 times was gone forever. In his place was a confident, loving, playful bulldog who had learned that sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for, and that real love doesn't give up when things get difficult. Max had found more than just a home. He had found his purpose, his family, and his own capacity for joy that he never knew existed. 2 years had passed since that magical Saturday when Emma and Max found each other at the animal shelter, and their bond had grown stronger than anyone could have imagined. What started as a little girl's dream of having a dog had blossomed into a relationship that taught both of them about unconditional love, patience, and the healing power of never giving up on someone you care about. Max was now 5 years old, and the transformation from his shelter days was so complete that sometimes even Sarah could hardly believe her eyes when she visited. The anxious, heartbroken dog who had given up hope of ever finding a family had become a confident, joyful bulldog who radiated happiness from his wrinkled face to his constantly wagging tail. Emma, now 10 years old, had grown into a compassionate, responsible young girl who understood the value of commitment and the importance of seeing the best in others. Her teachers often commented on her maturity and kindness, qualities that had been nurtured by her relationship with Max. Emma has this incredible ability to see potential in everyone, her 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Martinez, told Lisa during a parent conference. When new students join our class, she's always the first to include them. She has this gift for making others feel valued and accepted. Lisa smiled, knowing exactly where that gift had come from. Watching Emma love Max through his difficult early days had taught her daughter lessons about empathy and patience that no textbook could provide. The Thompson house had become a hub of activity, with neighborhood children often gathering in their backyard to play with Max. He had become something of a local celebrity, known for his gentle nature and his ability to sense when someone needed comfort. When 7-year-old Tommy from down the street was going through his parents' divorce, he would often sit quietly in the Thompsons' yard with Max's heavy head resting on his lap. Max seemed to understand that this little boy needed extra gentleness, and he would stay perfectly still for as long as Tommy needed him. Max has this amazing intuition. David observed one evening as they watched their dog comfort a crying neighbor child who had fallen off her bike. It's like he remembers what it felt like to be hurt and scared, so he knows exactly how to help others who are going through difficult times. This intuition had led to something wonderful and unexpected. The local children's hospital had started a therapy dog program, and Emma had suggested that Max might be perfect for it. After months of training and certification, Max had become an official therapy dog, visiting sick children once a week with Emma by his side. The first time they walked into the pediatric ward, Emma was nervous about how Max would react to the unfamiliar sounds and smells of the hospital, but Max seemed to understand immediately that this was important work. He walked calmly beside Emma, his expression serious and focused, as if he knew he had a job to do. Their first patient was a 6-year-old girl named Sophie who was recovering from surgery and hadn't spoken to anyone in days. When Max entered her room and gently placed his chin on her bed, something magical happened. Sophie's eyes lit up for the first time since her surgery, and she reached out with a small hand to touch Max's soft ears. "He's beautiful," Sophie whispered, the first word she had spoken in a week. Emma sat down beside Sophie's bed and told her all about Max's journey from the shelter to their family. As she talked, Max settled down on the floor where Sophie could see him. occasionally lifting his head to acknowledge her with gentle brown eyes. Max was scared and sad when we first met him, Emma explained, but love helped him get better, just like love is going to help you get better too. By the end of their visit, Sophie was laughing as Max performed simple tricks, and the nurses reported that her mood had improved dramatically. It was the beginning of Max's new career as a healer, using his own experience with trauma and recovery to help other children find hope. Week after week, Max and Emma visited the hospital, bringing joy to children who were facing their own difficult battles. Max had an uncanny ability to adjust his energy to each child's needs. With hyperactive children, he would play gently but enthusiastically. With quiet, withdrawn children, he would simply lie peacefully nearby, offering his calming presence. One particularly memorable visit was with 8-year-old Marcus, a boy who had been in the hospital for months with a rare condition. Marcus had become angry and withdrawn, refusing to participate in his physical therapy and pushing away anyone who tried to help him. When Max entered Marcus's room, the boy initially turned away, muttering that he didn't want to see any stupid dog, but Max was persistent in the gentlest way possible. He lay down just inside the doorway, not pushing himself on Marcus but making it clear that he wasn't going anywhere. Emma sat quietly with Max, reading a book and occasionally chatting softly with her dog. After about 20 minutes, Marcus's curiosity got the better of him. "What's wrong with his face?" Marcus asked, referring to Max's wrinkled bulldog features. "Nothing's wrong with it," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "That's just how bulldogs look. Some people think he's funny-looking, but I think he's the most handsome dog in the world." Marcus studied Max for a long moment. "People say I look weird too because of my scars." Emma looked at Marcus seriously. "Max has scars too. You can't see them because they're on the inside, in his heart. But they're there from when people hurt him before he came to live with us. Scars just mean you've been through something hard and you survived it. That makes you brave, not weird." Something in Emma's words reached Marcus in a way that weeks of counseling hadn't been able to. He slid down from his bed and cautiously approached Max, who remained perfectly still until Marcus was ready to touch him. "Does he really have scars on his heart?" Marcus asked, gently petting Max's head. "The kind that hurt when people don't understand how special you are," Emma explained. "But love helped heal those scars. Now instead of hurting, they remind him how strong he is." Marcus spent the rest of their visit with Max, talking about his own struggles and fears. By the time Emma and Max had to leave, Marcus was smiling for the first time in weeks. His nurses later reported that he had started participating in his therapy sessions again, telling everyone about the brave bulldog who had scars on his heart but chose to help other people anyway. As word spread about Max's work at the hospital, requests began coming in from other organizations. Schools wanted him to visit children who were struggling with bullying or family problems. Senior centers requested visits for elderly residents who missed having pets. Max and Emma's calendar filled up with opportunities to share their special brand of healing. But their most important work still happened at home, where Max continued to be Emma's best friend, confidant, and constant companion. They had developed their own language of looks and gestures, understanding each other in the way that only true best friends can. On quiet Sunday mornings, they could be found in Emma's room. Max sprawled across her bed while Emma read him stories about brave dogs and adventurous children. On summer evenings, they would sit together in the backyard, watching fireflies and planning their next hospital visit. "Do you think Max knows how much he's helped other kids?" Lisa asked David one evening as they watched Emma and Max playing in the yard. "I think he knows he's loved, and that's enough," David replied. "Everything else just flows from that." The animal shelter where Max had spent so much time had created a special display in their lobby featuring Max's story. Photos showed his journey from a sad, rejected dog to a confident therapy animal, and his story was used to encourage potential adopters not to give up on dogs who had been returned multiple times. "Max's story proves that every dog deserves a chance," the display read. "Sometimes the dogs who have been hurt the most have the biggest hearts and the most love to give. They just need someone who believes in them enough to be patient while they heal." Sarah, who still worked at the shelter, would often use Max's story when talking to families who were considering adopting dogs with difficult histories. "I know Max's story by heart," she would tell them. "And the most important part isn't that he was returned 6 times. The most important part is that the 7th family saw his potential and never gave up on him." Now he spends his days making sick children smile and teaching everyone he meets about the power of love and patience. As Emma and Max approached their 3rd anniversary together, Emma started planning a special celebration. She wanted to invite all the children they had met at the hospital, the neighbors who had become Max's friends, and Sarah from the shelter who had never stopped believing in Max's potential. "We're going to have the biggest party ever," Emma told Max as they sat together on their favorite spot on the couch. "Because you deserve to be celebrated every single day for being the most amazing dog in the whole world." Max looked up at Emma with those same brown eyes that had once been filled with sadness and fear, now sparkling with contentment and joy. His journey from abandoned shelter dog to beloved family member and therapy animal had taught everyone around him about the transformative power of unconditional love. In Emma's embrace, Max had found more than just a home. He had discovered his purpose, his confidence, and his own capacity for healing others. And Emma had learned that sometimes the most broken things, when loved properly, become the most beautiful. Their story had become a beacon of hope for shelter dogs everywhere, proof that every animal deserves a chance at happiness, and that love truly can heal even the deepest wounds. Max's tail still wagged every time someone told him he was a good boy, but now it wagged with the confidence of a dog who truly believed it, surrounded by a family who would never let him forget how special he was.